How you going, everybody? Welcome to the NFL Brekkie Show for Week 9, alongside my good pal, Laurie Horesh. I'm Phil Murphy. Laz, if this were a golf course, we'd be making the turn. It is the midway point of the NFL season. 18 regular season weeks of play. We have one game remaining in Week 9. That is today, 15 minutes past noon on ESPN. The U.S. has finally changed our clocks back, meaning we are at a 16-hour time difference sometime until the early part of next year. The final game of Week 9, Justin Herbert and the Chargers visiting the Jets, who have quietly won 3 in a row and quietly remain in the AFC wildcard race. No alternative broadcast today over on ESPN2. Josh Giddey, Ousmane Dieng, and the Thunder from Down Under host the Hawks. Simultaneous tip-off there. So you have options, but you and I will be watching Chargers and the Jets as we get ready to make the proverbial turn on our 18-hole season.
I think, now you got me thinking about the golf course.
Yeah.
I think it's a good time to take stock. And we like to do this normally at the third waypoint of the season, but scheduling caused a few changes this year. We normally go with the Dirty 30.
We can do the Dirty 230.
We're going to take some stock this season and do some midway. Yeah, well, and sadly, both of our Dirty 30s are very much in the back, the rearview mirror. We're going to take stock a little and hand out some awards in a unique Brekkie Show way. Yes, we'll touch on some of the bigger ones that you know about. MVPs will be discussed, Defensive Player of the Year in a hot contest for the back stretch, the back 9 of this season. But we're going to put our own little NFL Brekkie Show wrinkle on it. Some familiar favorites there, some thematic experiential awards that we're going to hand out. But before we get there, I think, look, when you have in recent weeks the upsets that we've had, and then there's been some weeks of perhaps some less than idealistic, beautiful football. And we have a couple of barn burners yesterday. The slate for Week 9 always lined up with a couple of heavyweight clashes. I think what we saw in the Cowboys going down to the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly delivered on promise. A fascinating game early. If you braved the early wake-up call in Australian time for the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs, more of a defensive tussle. I don't think a lot of people had 35 points as the total on that one. A defensive tussle over there in Germany. Also, shout out to the official there. Don't have his name, but the official who offered up a little German translation on one of the penalty calls that he made during that game. I think it was false start, and he gave, I'm not going to reiterate, I'm not going to attempt to provide it now. I don't speak a lick of German. But
offsides and offsides are very similar. That's able to be done.
False start, again, you're not going to get me trying. I see what you're doing. You're luring me in to try and offer up my attempt at a German translation.
I lived in Germany for 2 years, so we could kind of make.
You're a worldly man. It's why I don't mind your opinions on the round ball game either. But we won't get on that right now. But you love to see that, especially. I mean, the crowds over in Europe have always been fantastic as well, and the singing that goes on. John Denver belting out from a crowd of 40, 50,000 German and European NFL fans. So a lot of those games delivered, perhaps in another one regarding the Seattle Seahawks and who they went up against in the Baltimore Ravens, perhaps less of a barn burner and more of a statement from that team in the purple and black, those devilish Ravens up there in Baltimore. So it does open itself up for some hot takes with some resurgent teams, some high-end tussles, the tush-push getting a prime time or at least an isolated island game view again, especially when you consider some of the other contests that were on that late afternoon slate. I don't know how many people were turning in to watch once again, seeing Danny DeVito get a run there for the Giants. But nonetheless, we're going to open up with hot takes today, Stu. We've got the Hot Take Hotline brought to you by Macca's. And we've got some right off the bat, and this is perhaps a familiar subject for us this season, and it reared itself to the fore once again with the Atlanta Falcons and that offense. This one from Guardy. I'm so happy that Atlanta are losing because the whole I don't care about your fantasy team only works if you win. Give the ball to your best players. Closing with a phrase that, whilst not expletive, we will leave off the Disney show. The Atlanta Falcons, Bill. I mean, it's a fair point because over the years, you think about coaches, hard-nosed coaches like, say, Bill Belichick, who would change running back priorities week in, week out, who would go from featuring one wide receiver to them going quiet. Maybe Sean Payton used to cop similar heat with his wide receivers back in the glorious, high-flying Saints days with Drew Brees. You couldn't pinpoint maybe Marquez Colston, but it'd be different types of of speedy receivers or a possession style receiver or a different running back or a receiving running back getting the feature role week in, week out. But the difference with those teams and this Falcons team is this Falcons team isn't overly successful. This Falcons team is offensively efficient. This Falcons team went down 31-28 to the story of the week, Josh Dobbs, playing quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, not knowing everybody's name on offense, not knowing his teammates' name, going by nicknames and first names at best, practicing the handoff, practicing the cadence with his center, Garrett Bradbury, on the
sideline.
On the sideline, we're seeing this. Josh Dobbs, who, as everyone will have known off social media, is incredibly intelligent. The science brain on the man is incredibly impressive. Pictures of him, they're throwing out the nickname of the Pastronaut because of his knowledge in the field, the shots of him wearing the spacesuit. It's all building, and also just generally regarded as a high caliber man off the field, a high quality individual who brings character. And I'm sure that's part of what endears him to a Vikings team that's in such turmoil after the Kirk Cousins injury. But sequences that are getting social media plays, a goal line series where Bijan Robinson isn't even on the field, and you start with a false start, three terribly inept plays, largely featuring Jonnu Smith and then Tyler Algier. It's grim. I know they were without Drake London in this game, and the Taylor Heineke experience did not get off to a explosive start, certainly turnover-worthy, turnover-style plays, putting the ball in dangerous positions. Once again, a feature, doesn't matter whether it's Heineke or previously when it was Desmond Ridder. But the obvious talent that's there, and it's not just limited to Robinson. What you see with Kyle Pitts, and Jonnu Smith takes a quick tight end screen out wide in the flat and takes it 60+ yards to the house. So it's not all terrible when you're featuring Jonnu Smith, but Kyle Pitts himself, the explosion that you see when he is featured, they make football look so hard. There's a couple of NFC South teams, particularly on offense, that make football look so hard. Given the investment, the expectations that we had for that offensive line as foundation.
I think all four. I think all four of them make football look hard offensively.
The Saints, certainly. But it really does, Carolina Panthers. Oh, now you've just got me playing out NFC South lowlights with the ball.
Someone's going to host a playoff game in that division.
They really are. But ultimately, I think with what we've seen in Atlanta, you can't maintain that defensive line of, this isn't fantasy football or, we play to win. When the results aren't there, you have a cupcake schedule, you're in a cupcake division. And I know football and every regular season victory, every victory in the NFL is hard earned. But the way that they have deployed their assets, once again, showing just a total disconnect, the lack of any sort of flow between personnel department, scouting, player acquisition into coaching, execution, who you're featuring. We've seen in this league, when you have star talent, feed them the ball. When you have a star receiver, do not operate in a world where it's 7 targets for you, 6 targets for you, 5 for you, 7 to the running back. When you have that type of skill set available to you, use it or lose it. It says it's NFL, it's not for long. This talent, whether the NFL careers are painfully short or they look to move on, especially in an era where players can demand trades and can get out of dodge or dodgy situations rather a whole lot quicker than they used to back in prior eras. Yeah, I think bang on here. Whilst I don't wish this for Falcons fans, and we got some interesting Falcons takes to come up later in the show, it's at least they're not winning. At least it's not confirming poor execution and a poor philosophy from Arthur Smith.
Well, Laz, I just flicked over to look at the NFC wildcard standings. Somebody's going to be the 7 seed in the NFC. You have the winner and runner-up in the NFC East, all but guaranteed playoff position. You have the winner and runner-up in the NFC West, San Francisco and Seattle, all but guaranteed playoff position. After that, let me go through the standings as it sits today. With this win, Minnesota has the 7th wildcard spot. They're 5-4. Josh Dobbs is their quarterback. He's responsible for Arizona's only win this season. And then, as you said, when you and I did the show a week ago, he was employed by Arizona still. He flies to Minnesota, and he knows as many of the Vikings names as you and I do. He knows KJ Osborne. He knows a few of the guys, but he certainly doesn't know everybody, even as offensive lineman, I would imagine, especially as intelligent as he is. So you have Minnesota, and then it's a two-way tie. The Commanders and the Falcons are 1 game back, and then it's the Bucks, the Packers, the Rams. I mean, now we're getting to the doldrums, but one of those teams will get a playoff game. And I think come January, the Falcons are going to look at this as one of, not the only, but one of the games they threw away. And you alluded to it. I don't need to rehash it all, but Bijan Robinson, it's not as though Arthur Smith took over and he was saddled with Bijan Robinson, the fan favorite. You drafted him 7th overall in an era when most running backs, even ones of his caliber, are taken back half of the first round or on day 2. And if this were a day 2 guy that fantasy owners want, that's fine. You invested the number 7 overall pick in the NFL draft in him over any available quarterback with the opportunity perhaps to trade up for quarterbacks, invested that kind of draft asset in somebody, and then he's only on the field for 61% of snaps in a game you lost by 3 at home. And you mentioned the sequence where they started 1st and goal on the 1 after a recovered fumble. They go back 5 yards. It's their RB2. It's their tight end 2 who are getting all the touches. Minus 4 yards, settle for a field goal. It's a coin flip this season with the Falcons, whether or not Robinson's on field for 70% of the touches. So this is not a game that Atlanta can lose at home. That home field environment is typically an advantage. It's not like the SoFi Stadium neutrality. Atlanta is partisan, and Minnesota's defense, which has played better in recent weeks, continued to play well. But I think that's a byproduct of just schematic stubbornness in Atlanta and an unwillingness to. At this point, it's almost like he doesn't want to concede that the fans who have been clamoring with partisan fantasy interest. No, they're right. We need Drake London on the field more. I know he wasn't available for this game. We need Kyle Pitts to get more touches. We need Bijan Robinson to get more touches. And it's not as though Robinson's not performing. All the time he's catching passes that are thrown behind him with one hand whilst eluding a defender. He's putting together the highlights and how running backs are utilized by successful teams in this league, rightfully or wrongfully. They go 4 years where they're getting burned. I mean, just all the tread off the tires, take the 5th-year option, and then cycle, rinse, repeat. It's like they're trying to keep Bijan Robinson, fresh for what? The playoff opportunity is now for a young team with loads of talent and an appealing market, candidly, for off-season for either a quarterback or one of these late first-round picks, which there are quarterbacks in this draft who are going to fall to that range. Michael Penix, Shedeur Sanders, guys like that, or Shedeur Sanders, I should say. So the Falcons threw one away here, and I think come season's end, not having the tiebreaker against Minnesota, they're going to be sitting there at 8-9, wondering what if. Not that they would have made noise in the playoffs, but getting there with this team would have been an accomplishment. They just have to feel like they threw one away.
Well, we're hitting if I'm handing out a mid-season award for us, it's that we have stayed consistent on this train. We have not let up. We want to be free Bijan, free Kyle Pitts, free Drake London, let these boys fly. And what you said there about, saving them for what? When you talk about running backs, and we'll move on to the next hot take, but when you talk about running backs, there's always conversation when you invest in the first-round pick. It's one thing to invest a first-round pick in a running back, which draws all sorts of questions about positional value. But then you talk about paying them a second contract, and that's where the criticism levels up even more. Mm-hmm. So you've done one part of it. Bijan Robinson is a special talent. You invested in him for what we thought you were going to do with the football, what we thought your offensive philosophy was going to be. At least you knew. It's like when Zeke got drafted in Dallas behind a really good offensive line that they wanted to run the ball. You're like, okay, well, at least we're going to see the best version of this. We're going to see him applied. We see, okay, you can quibble about the investment and the draft capital spent, but the execution is going to show value. They're not even doing that part, right? So that's where we'll leave that. We'll move on. Our second take, though, Phil, this comes in from an anonymous local source here. The name didn't come through with any clarity here, but our anonymous NFL fan wants to know, should a team look at hiring someone like Rey Mysterio or a similar wrestler to combat the tush push? We're thinking about sunset flips, which for those that don't know is a wrestling move where you launch yourself over, you flip over the top of your crouched opponent, grab them by the waist and power bomb them into the ground. Look, the tush push was on show once again early in their own territory for the Philadelphia Eagles in their victory. Crucial conversions here You can quibble about whether the spot was a little generous, or whether Mike McCarthy, his coaching staff, or the man up in the sky on the Cowboys should have spotted that, maybe thrown a challenge flag. But once again, an early and massively pivotal conversion for the Philadelphia Eagles offense that leads in an opening touchdown drive for themselves. And again, in a 5-point game, tight divisional game, it's incredibly vital. Teams really struggling to come up with creative ways now, especially the Philadelphia Eagles have put on tape the wrinkle off of it, where you kick it out to the running back after drawing all the defensive attention in. Is it crazy? Is this completely wild to think that we need to go to somewhere, even if it's not as far as wrestling, but the leaping over the line of scrimmage to block field goals that we saw, perhaps think back to the Legion of Boom days and some of the executions of that we saw over the years. You don't have to worry about those types of contact calls that happen in a field goal attempt. But do we look at a bigger body guy? Do we look at someone like John Cena, who's doing less wrestling these days, may be available for coaching, who's also executed the move? How do we combat? Is there any more creative ways, short of the NFL competition committee coming in and doing something about the tush push? It is here. It is impactful. It's going to cause big time conversions in the postseason. The Eagles are very, very likely to feature deeply in the NFC side of things. Is that crazy to think of doing something like a flip over the line of scrimmage to make contact? What would you do, Phil? Are we all out of ideas? Is there any lower? Would you stack defensive tackles behind each other like the tush push does and try and create a forceful wedge that way? What can we do? What can teams do to combat this phenomenon that has turned first down to 1st and 7, or instead of 1st and 10, 1st and 7, or 1st and 8 for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, I think we saw the Cowboys attempt something of some kind of flip over the line of scrimmage when the Eagles were backed up to their own 1. They took over after the Schoonmaker Reed Blankenship tackle on 4th and goal originally ruled the touchdown, then overturned upon review. Eagles did a tush push from their own 1 on 1st and 10 and picked up 4 yards effortlessly because Dallas went high. They tried the Rey Mysterio method. It didn't work. I do think they need to look to another athletic platform for resolution the league over. I'm thinking maybe a Sir Graham Henry, any of these great rugby coaches. It's not the high man wins, Laz. It's the low man wins. You got to get low. You got to interlock shoulders, but in the NFL, you can collapse the pile and keep the guys from just driving through.
That is your second rugby reference in 24 hours, and let me tell you, the people are here for it.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, I did mention the Jordy Barrett offload to Rico Ioane at Deutsche Bank Park as Brian Cook had the fumble return lateral courtesy of Mike Edwards. I was proud of that one.
Ryan Cook down the sideline, by the way, stretched those legs out.
Right. Well, he was coming off the edge too. I mean, he was a thumper out of Cincinnati. Remember, he played with Sauce Gardner. He played with Kobe Coby Bryant. He was that safety that was the thumper. And now you're seeing he's got a little pace to him. He can crack for sure, but he's got some pace to him. And now that play was the difference in a day when the otherwise Kansas City's offense was a little bit inept, especially after halftime. But Laz, it wasn't the Cowboys' inability to stop the run that cost them this game. I thought that was what it was going to be. I picked the Eagles. I went heavy on Swift props. I thought this was going to be very similar to the Arizona Cardinals loss, but more competitive because Dak always plays well against Philadelphia. Dak was magnificent. Any narrative on any shows, even on our network, that were questioning how much of the blame should Dak Prescott shoulder, none whatsoever. The Cowboys struggled to get in the red zone. That was they moved the ball effortlessly from 20 to 20. They get to the red zone and everything falls down. The target rate to CeeDee Lamb, the catch percentage of CeeDee Lamb, the completion percentage of Dak Prescott. It's a schematic concern that they have to iron out if they want to beat the NFC elite. It wasn't their run game was great. The Eagles in the fourth quarter went when everybody said, "Hey, we're going to run the ball down, right down Broad Street in Philadelphia, right down Broad Street." And the Eagles have done that with success against almost every opponent this season. They failed to do it against the Cowboys. The Cowboys got stops time and again in those critical downs in the fourth quarter. They stopped the run game. But to answer your question,
on 3 drives. 14 yards on 3 drives.
And it was only like 3 minutes off the clock.
Yeah.
The Eagles should have lost that game. The Cowboys were the better team for 60 minutes. The score was not reflective of the superior team. But Dallas's inability to execute in the red zone cost them. Dak losing just that little bit of pace that I think 3 or 4 years ago he would have converted that 2-point conversion. He would have maybe gotten in the end zone with his legs on the play that ultimately before the Schoonmaker stop, or a couple plays before that. But to answer your question, moonsaults and Legion of Boom finishers, that's not the way to go. Interlocking shoulders.
Okay.
Use your scrum half. All of it. That's the key to stop the tush push.
Scrum half joining on there. Yeah, me now. Okay, a couple of things. Cowboys, whilst they were 3 from 5 in the red zone, which is fine across the league, it's the high profile misses there, especially when you're taking 4 downs on some. And look, it's a game of inches. We can bust out the Al Pacino speech from halftime any given Sunday, inch by inch. This was literally like with the blades of grass of white that Dak's Air Jordan 1 cleats clipped on the sideline there with Luke Schoonmaker, his knees coming in. It's absolutely the rule, not an issue with the ruling here, but it's funny there that in the goal line or at any other point, the catch would be completed when Schoonmaker goes to ground, but at the goal line, it's where your knee goes down when you've gained control of the ball in terms of
and to your point, it's Dallas's second in points per drive in the NFL. Only the Eagles are better. They're 31st in touchdown rate and goal to go situations.
Yeah.
So something's wrong there in the final 10 yards.
They outgained the Eagles by around 150 yards. Dak Prescott was fantastic. Dak Prescott's playing the best quarterback out of anybody in the NFC right now. Jalen Hurts inclusive. I don't think you can watch that game yesterday and think you look at who played the position better. It was Dak Prescott. And I've been highly critical of this offense, highly critical of the Cowboys, despite where my heart lies. But this is, the Eagles take care of details. We talked about their short yardage dominance there. That's part of it. I think, I don't want to dive into refereeing. It was a bizarre one. Some baffling calls there, not just in that game, across the league. Wasn't a banner week for the end. What happened in that Washington game with a textbook sack being called for roughing the passer was absolutely
KJ Henry, robbed.
Oh my God, unconscionable. But anyway, we're not going to dive into that because we're going to get to awards and it's a positive thing. But I will say on the interlocking, I did listen to Jordan Mailata, who was on the New Heights show with his teammate Jason Kelsey and Travis Kelce.
I know what he said.
Yeah, and he said it's no, but it's to your point, actually. He said tush push isn't anything. It's not a rugby play, and it's not. Those that have played rugby or rugby league, footy codes down here, it's not. There's no interlocking, there's no driving, but perhaps the answer to it is the rugby play, is a more bound, unified force from the defensive line rather than going as piecemeal guys. And also, great work from the Eagles using tempo on one of their tush pushes because it didn't allow the Cowboys to sub. You don't get Hankins and Muzzy Smith out there. You get Damone Clark wearing 33, a linebacker up on the line of script. That's the details. That's where Nick Sirianni and his coaching staff, his OC, and the veterans on that team deserve absolute credit because those are the details.
And that's how you can be imperfect, but 8-1. Everybody's poking holes in what the Eagles are doing. They're not dominant. They're not this, that. They're 8-1 and nobody else is. And that's because of the details and that's why they do.
Yeah. No, they're not the top of my power rankings. They'll be scrolling down actually right now as I speak. Wow. They are sitting 3 in my power rankings right now, but they are the top of the NFC and they deservedly belong there. But okay, that's
23 minutes on Hot Take Hotline. Brekkie's getting pulled.
This was Hot Take Hotline, but this was the Hot Take Helpline today. We're trying to help out here. But Phil, that comes from some heated, sizzling thoughts and takeaways to grander narratives as we cross over to the Midseason Awards. And some unique ones, Phil, because we're not just about, we will touch on the MVP I mentioned before. We'll touch on some big line ones, but we've got some unique ones that we dive into as we add some shine a light on some of the star performers, perhaps some of the more suspect takes from the 2023 season so far.
Yeah, Laz, we're going to go with a bit of tempo here. Keep the show moving. I call these the half Brekkies. I know you don't love that term, but that's what I'm going to call it. It's like, the Academy Awards versus the Oscars. This is the half Brekkies. That's the trophy that's going to go in the mail. And we'll start again. We have some Brekkie branded awards, but we have to start with most valuable player. It's a fascinating race this season. There's some tops and turns and twists and tails. I'm actually sticking with the guy I had in the preseason. And my vote today, it's close. There are 2 that are right at the top of the heap for me. I'm going with Joe Burrow. Looking at what he was through 4 weeks, clearly not fit. That calf muscle was not right. They were planted in shotgun, couldn't roll him out, couldn't get him under center. In those first 4 weeks, the Bengals were 1-3. They were bottom 2 in the NFL in points per game and yards per game. Burrow had 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions at that point. That offense was anemic. Again, bottom 2 in points per game, yards per game, one of the worst in the league. Since then, since he's gotten healthy in the last 4 weeks, so half the sample size, points per game has more than doubled. The team is 4-0, and yards per game has gone up 111.8, and teams are terrified to play the Cincinnati Bengals. Their last 3 wins, they're not playing cupcakes. They beat the Seahawks. Forget what happened to the Seahawks in Baltimore. Seattle entered that game as the NFC West leaders over the 49ers. Oh, by the way, the Bengals went to San Francisco and beat the 49ers. Then they beat the Bills in prime time under the bright lights in an emotional game where you would think the emotional advantage would go to Buffalo. Cincinnati wins that game. Score was not indicative of the dominance. The Bengals were in control throughout. Late touchdown made it a 6-point margin. So for me, Joe Burrow today, he proved what the distinction of that team, what their ceiling is when he's fit versus not, is why he gets my MVP vote. Laz, before we go to yours, I would say if you are keen for a little flitter, a little sprinkle, a little flutter on a prop, Jared Goff, the market on him for most valuable player, it's a narrative award. The Lions have not won that division in 30 years. The schedule that lies ahead for Detroit, they have a smooth path to the 2 seed in the NFC. If we're talking in January and the Lions are 13-4 and a 2 seed, or 12-5 and a 2 seed in the NFC, Jared Goff getting MVP nods at $19 or $21 right now is worth a little sprinkle. I'm throw that in. But today, the half Brekkie goes to Joe Cool, always cool under pressure, Joe Burrow.
I think if this was an award for the last month of football, you're absolutely bang on there. He's back. And that's the bigger thing in terms of we're handing out awards here, but if we look at the back half of this NFL season, like Joe Burrow is entirely back. But back is the operative word there, because it sounds very, very suspect for Jamar Chase right now. He took a big shot, leaping up for a deep ball, and landed on that kind of lower back area hard. Clearly wasn't right the rest of the game yesterday. And then his comments coming out of the locker room today is he's talking about being there for his teammates. I've just got to get healthy. I'm going to be here to support my teammates. That type of sentiment, which makes you feel, okay, how long is this guy going to be out for? Are we talking about an IR situation? Like, as great as it is that we see T. Higgins make a big step back up in production, going over the century mark through the air yesterday, and Joe Mixon's rejuvenated burst has clearly been seen. Tyler Boyd having a really nice season in that classic Tyler Boyd number 3 slot role. If Jamar Chase, who has had some massive, massive games after a bit of a slow start, if he's to miss a month, as great as Joe Burrow is, and I came into this season saying he is the clear and isolated number 2 behind Patrick Mahomes on the quarterback rankings, as great as he is in full flight, and he is getting right back into full flight MVP mode, his old LSU teammate missing time, that's a huge, huge problem. And it's something to watch. But I agree. I think if you're looking at the kind of, particularly in the past 4 weeks, like Joe Burrow has been QB class number 1. For me, though, I'm going not with someone who I had as the MVP pick before the season. That's Trevor Lawrence, and he could go on a run, but I think their red zone inefficiency is kind of what hampers his numbers, and probably hampers an extra win being in the win-loss column for the Jaguars. I'm going with Lamar Jackson. I think he ticks one of the overarching narratives and boxes that generally runs with the MVP. Is he the quarterback of the best team in the league? Yeah, they're number 1 in my power rankings.
Yeah. And they were your preseason Super Bowl pick. They were your preseason.
They were my Super Bowl pick. They were my Super Bowl pick before the season starts. They are number 1 in my power rankings. They're the most complete team, and they're doing it in dominant ways against other playoff teams that most teams aren't. And in the last few weeks, seeing those victories over both the Detroit Lions and the Seattle Seahawks are 37-3 thumping, where Lamar didn't even have to throw a touchdown pass, because when you get
didn't play in the fourth quarter.
We've got Odell Beckham getting his first touchdown in those colors, but it's not off the hands of Lamar Jackson. It's a nice little route to the corner there and a little dance, but you got the Gus Bus and Mitchell firing in the backfield, and you've got. It wasn't a huge day for Zay Flowers. It wasn't a huge day for Rashad Bateman, but Mark Andrews, like a metronome, so productive. Odell Beckham having some more productive days as well. Defensively, this is one of the elite defenses in the NFL. But back to why it's MVP time, because he is the quarterback. He's a productive quarterback on the best team in football. And whilst his numbers, he's got 9 passing touchdowns. You get to add 5 rushing touchdowns to that with Lamar. 0 fumbles lost on rushing attempts. Shows that whilst he might not be as entirely 100% electrifyingly fast, even if it's 90 to 95% as fast as he was when he broke into the league, it's still so damaging. He's second in the league in explosive play rate. He's first in completion percentage for a quarterback who was criticized for their ability to throw and be a pocket passer. Second fewest interceptions with 3 on the season. CJ Stroud has 1. 6th in combined pass and rush yards. He leads the league in rushing from the quarterback position with 440 total rush yards. 338 of them, Phil, are before first contact, which whilst that says, he's not, and that's almost 100 clear of the next best, which is Patrick Mahomes. So he's saying, he's not exactly breaking tackles. No, but that points to you how smart he is as a rusher, that he is not taking hits, that he is getting himself. So much of this is he's not putting himself in position, despite the age-old narratives about running quarterbacks, to not get hurt. He's second in the league in rushing first downs with 32. Jalen Hurts is top with 39. 20 of Jalen Hurts are on tush pushes or sneaks. 0 are for Lamar. So I think when you're just looking at kind of open play designed runs outside of the tush push or sneak area, you're showing the value there. And that's what we're talking about, value. So for me, Lamar Jackson, he's doing it through the air. He's doing it on the ground, even in a still explosive, mentioned the explosive play rate, but in a smart way. That team is firing. And they've put the fear in the rest of the NFL, certainly the rest of the AFC, and it should be the rest of the NFL, that this isn't the Greg Roman days where if you figure out how to take away our very specific, very stylized rushing offense, that we will capitulate. He's beating you in every single way. The wider Ravens are beating you in every single way. And I think whilst this is an individual award, not a team award, when we look at the team context of people like Brock Purdy, his candidacy in the MVP race has certainly fallen off the last 3 weeks. And honestly, with it, so is Christian McCaffrey's, who's making a phenomenal case. But whilst McCaffrey's production has maintained and he's still been prolific, they've suffered losses, which goes back to that classic argument. It's not called the best player in the league.
Yeah.
It's called the most valuable player in the league. And that's where the guy that touches the ball on every single play, that's where that value is insurmountable, as phenomenal a case as McCaffrey and like Tyreek Hill and even AJ Brown have made. That's my nomination. Let's keep it moving, though.
Yeah, a lot of the distinction for me, the Ravens, you mentioned Lamar, all the yards he gets before contact. The Ravens yesterday ran for 298, fourth most in a franchise history that is famous for running the ball. I mean, Jamal Lewis, he has a single-game record, and that's one of the few games that the Ravens have where they have more than 298. But of the 298, 150, just over half, were after first contact. So if Lamar say, I pulled a hamstring, I have to miss this game and the next, the Ravens with that defense and that run game, they're built to still win, depending on opponent, of course. Cincinnati, we saw they were inept through 4 weeks when Joe Burrow wasn't fully fit. That's the distinction for me, but you're not going to get me picketing and protesting if Lamar Jackson ends up getting it, because the best quarterback on the best team argument today could well be Lamar Jackson. It's one or the other. All due respect to Patrick Mahomes, that team's winning with defense at the moment. Cincinnati and Baltimore are the two hottest teams, the two teams that I'm scared of the most in the AFC come January. Only one can win the division. And Laz, this is looking like the best division in the NFL, because as it stands today, take a snapshot. The Ravens lead the division, and your 3 wild cards in the AFC, Steelers, Browns, and Bengals. And Laz, 2 of those 4 teams in the division have one of the short list of favorites for Defensive Player of the Year. You and I talked about this on the phone yesterday when we were contemplating all of this. It's a 3-horse race there. It's Micah Parsons, it's Myles Garrett, it's TJ Watt. For me, I'm going Myles Garrett today. 3 weeks ago, I would have said Micah Parsons. In fact, I would have said maybe outside of Christian McCaffrey, he's the most valuable non-quarterback in the NFL. Myles Garrett's tied for the NFL lead in sacks, tied for the NFL league in forced fumbles with 4. He has a QB hit in every game. But the thing for me, you talk about best player, best team for quarterback, best player on best defense, the 3 lowest single game yardage totals league-wide, all at the hands of the Cleveland Browns, including the 58 to which they held Clayton Tune, getting him a little out of tune, and the Arizona Cardinals last week. 58 yards in 60 minutes of football. This is the number 1 total defense. It's the number 3 scoring defense. And Myles Garrett, just watching him, he's an edge rusher. He's over the center, dribbling an invisible basketball, and then disrupting for a sack. It's that wow factor that Micah Parsons absolutely brings, that TJ Watt absolutely brings. But today I give the slightest of edges to Myles Garrett.
Yeah, I'm in unison with you. Myles Garrett gets it for me. It's also that when you're talking about Defensive Player of the Year, we're focusing on defense, but how many of his plays have led to points as well directly? Micah Parsons and TJ Watt have had their moments as well, but we have seen him literally take over games and deliver double-digit points to a Browns offense that has far from hit its stride in 2023, quarterback issues, and also obviously with Nick Chubb out and their attempts to replace a battery of offensive line issues as well. That's really hampered them. But the constant is Myles Garrett leading the best defense in the NFL. You mentioned some of the numbers. I'm going to dive in too far, but when you're up the top of the list, right up there in the 1-2 slots throughout the season in pass rush win rate, and also up there in double team rate, tells you exactly what you need to know.
That's Aaron Donald type of impact.
That's where there's no fat on this. There's no empty calories in these numbers. This is what they're doing. This is how he's delivering. This is who he's going against. And like you said, off the edge, interior, crossing people up, like he's been watching Allen Iverson highlights. It's been a treat to show. Okay, let's get into the more colorful ones. And I'm going to go off the top here. Let's move on to some more NFL Brekkie show specials, something that captures our essence. The Chubbs Peterson Award, the I'm wrong, I was wrong, you were right, I was stupid, etc., etc. A mea culpa of sorts, our takes that have aged the worst from preseason. Phil, I'm going to do the nice thing, and I'm going to go first to show that I'm not just trying to, heap the negative tone onto you. Look, I talked myself into the Detroit Lions cannot play as mistake-free football as they did in previous seasons, that I wasn't the biggest David Montgomery investment fan, that the absence of Jamison Williams, how is that going to impact their passing game, given that it was Amon-Ra St. Brown and a lot of question marks? Little do we know that we've got Sam Laporta competing for tight end 1 stock in fantasy and just in real life putting himself in there as an elite tight end right out of the gate, right out of Iowa, fresh into the top tier tight end.
One does, who's a tight end in the NFL.
As they do. I mean, you got Josh Reynolds making big plays week after week, except for last week when I picked him to make a big play. We'll get to propaganda later. So this is the mea culpa for me that the Detroit Lions have been sticky. The defense, their success has been sticky, and the defense has taken the improvement on, even with some injuries to some of that young talent, that seeing guys like Brian Branch in and out of the lineup week in, week out. But look, you got to cop when you're wrong. There's a lot of things to like about the Lions. I said they would not make the playoffs. I'm not wrong yet, but I'm looking very, very wrong. So that is mine. My Chubbs Peterson. I was wrong. Detroit, you were right.
Laz, I struggled with this. I did. I'm going to go through some of my
takes are so fantastic that struggled.
Were shorter than $3. I had a multi, Kansas City, Philly, and San Francisco to make the playoffs. That's looking pretty good. I had the Jags over 10.5 wins. That's looking okay. Mm-hmm. Saints to win the division at $2.30. I mean, but someone's going to win that division, and I think the Saints right now are in the best position. Maybe Cleveland under 9.5 wins, but their schedule's a bear down the stretch. Tyreek Hill over 1,500 yards if he stays fit. I mean, even Derek Carr, my 4,000-yard pick, which wasn't looking great, he's actually on pace now for 4,012 yards. But I do have one that is my Chubbs Peterson pick, and I lean into it because you said I was wrong. And Laz, I was stupid. You were smart. You were right. I was wrong. My NFC playoff picture, these are the 7 teams I picked. Let me know which of these stands out. I had Philadelphia, San Francisco. I had the Saints and the Lions. Those are my division winners. I had the Cowboys. I had the Seahawks. And I knew it was going to be tough figuring out that 7th team. I just knew I was going to have a hard time with it. I went back and forward, to and fro. I went with the New York Giants to have a positive build on what they did a year ago. You vehemently disagreed with this. I said, no, Laz, they figured out the formula that extended Daniel Jones. He and Saquon Barkley are going to find a way. Now, Jones hasn't been healthy, but their problems are far more extensive than that. This team is dead last by a margin in points per game, 11 points per game. The mighty Raiders held them to 6, buoyed by Antonio Pierce against his former team, but 8 sacks they yielded to the Raiders. The Giants are also comfortably in last place in terms of yards per game. It's getting late really early with Daniel Jones being out for the season, having just done, worked the 1-year extension of Saquon Barkley and made the long-term commitment to Daniel Jones. It's the Brian Daboll Coach of the Year honor is, I guess he was the Coach of the Year last year. You could have made a great argument for Kyle Shanahan as well last year, but yeah, New York Giants to make the wild card is my Chubbs Peterson Award for this year.
Yeah, I don't think it's getting any better either. Not when you've got a trip to go visit the angry Micah Parsons and Dallas Cowboys defense.
Yeah, the team total for the Giants in that game is 12. I might take the under.
I think I might take the under too. Oh, this could age terribly. The bit, Daniel Jones being a $40 million a year anchor around that offense and that franchise, something I've been very, very clear about. The bit that's really concerning now, though, is the Brian Daboll side of this and the coaching staff side of this, because when you get Xavier McKinney saying that the leaders aren't being heard on the team, and they're trying to go out and execute, they're not doing a good enough job executing, but they feel like their voices and what they're seeing isn't being heard and factored into game plans or adjustments or whatever that may be. And he was trying to be really respectful, but obviously a lot of frustration there. That's those quotes, those sentiments, those ideas starting to filter out from the locker room to the media. Not a great thing, Phil. Not a great thing.
No.
Let's move on to the next one. Let's go to the Dennis Green next, because I want to close with the Evanescence, because the Evanescence Award is a little more conceptual. As many of my ideas.
They're all conceptual.
They're all conceptual. The Dennis Green, they are who we thought they were.
They are who we thought they were.
If you want to crown them, crown them.
Light them off.
This could be positive or negative, but a team that we absolutely nailed on the money, that we had in line. I could go with the Ravens, but that feels like crowing a little early when we got a long season, a lot of divisional run ahead.
The Ravens, was that intentional?
You like that? I am going to go with the Washington football, particularly the Washington offensive hype train that was going throughout preseason, that a lot of people were getting on. Sam Howell, he's going to be the answer. Look at the weapons. We'd heard that before. My idea from the start was that the Washington football team's offense would not get past their own offensive line. It would sputter. It would be inconsistent. It just would not be down to down. And while their defense has had its issues as well, I feel very strong in that whole Washington operation built on absolute quicksand up front would fail to be a factor week in, week out. They edge of victory 20-17 against the New England Patriots this week to keep themselves at 4-5, somewhere sniffing 500. But the reality is that they are not a factor this season, despite the talent they have, despite the frustratingly wasting career of the likes of Terry McLaurin. And we could be having a conversation about Jahan Dotson soon around that as well. I know there's a new era coming and there's likely coaching changes under the new ownership there in Washington. But yeah, this you could see coming. And yes, it's close to home in the NFC East, but this one you could see coming from a mile away, that despite the positive narratives and despite that Sam Howell will put on throws every single week, he will deliver something that makes you go, oh yes, I've seen it once. I can see it again and I can see it more frequently. Mm-hmm. They're not built to sustain. They're not built to succeed. And ultimately, as far as the 2023 season goes, short of playing spoiler against a couple of divisional teams, they're not built to impact.
Laz, I'm surprised you didn't go with your preseason long ball, the Dolphins, to be the highest scoring team at $21. They're 3.5 points clear at the midway point. I mean, that $21 gap is basically what you need for a propaganda or popular demand competition. But you were bang on with them being the highest scoring offense in the NFL. I will crow with my Denny Green Award because that's the nature of the award. They are who we thought they were. And I'm sticking with this one because I did not jump off the bandwagon when this team, who I've already talked about multiple times on the show, started 1-3. I said last year they started 2-3, and they were a late personal foul away from overtime in the AFC Championship game. That is the Cincinnati Bengals. They were my Super Bowl pick to win the Super Bowl over the 49ers. The latter half of that isn't looking as great since Deebo Samuel got injured. But I'm not ready to abandon that yet because, as you mentioned, Dak Prescott is the best quarterback in the NFC. Then it's probably Jalen Hurts, and then it really levels out in terms of quarterback play. And we know how Dak has struggled against the 49ers in the head-to-head. So But I'm going with the Bengals as my Denny Green Award, still being an AFC elite team. My preseason pick was them to not win the division, but to make a Super Bowl run as a wild card because of how dangerous they are all the time in January. And now they're starting to play with that swagger. When 9 gets off the bus, 52 other dudes believe. When they were 1-3, they beat the Cardinals. Everybody expected them to beat the Cardinals. Fine. They beat Seattle at home in primetime. They go to San Francisco on national TV, and they win handily. Then they beat the Bills. They control the Bills. Now they have momentum. Since week 5, Joe Burrow leads the NFL in completion percentage, completions per game, and he's tied for the lead in touchdowns. I'm not saying he's a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes, but his numbers are superior because his weapons are superior. If Jamar Chase is injured, long-term, that's a problem, but I'm not ready to go to that if yet because T. Higgins looked more than serviceable yesterday, 8 catches on 9 targets for 110 yards. Tyler Boyd, hey, we're going deep with 3 minutes left and that team having 1 timeout. Why? Because we got 9 throwing the ball. We're putting it to 83, and that functionally put the game away. And then you had Joe Mixon shaking Von Miller out of his jock for the first down that sealed it. Cincinnati, they are who I thought they were. The short list of AFC and NFL elite, despite the 1-3 start, they are back.
All right, we're going to zoom through the rest of these because time is of the essence. But I will say, John Roberts just chiming in with his Ravens to win the Super Bowl ticket and my Tua to throw 40-plus TDs ticket he's feeling good about. That's his Denny Green.
I had a Kirk Cousins over 30 TD ticket that was looking pretty good. So if you get
this one hurts me. This one hurts me. My Anthony Richardson 10-plus rushing touchdowns was super happy until it was super sad. I'm with you there, John. I'll pour one out for you there. I cannot wait to see Anthony.
That actually dovetails beautifully into my Evanescence Award, Laz.
It does indeed. So now finally the Evanescence Award. Let's go quickly. While it dovetails, let's hand it to you. This is the award for the recently retired player that you would like to see back in the NFL. Some great fan submissions that we got here. I had Brian submitting that he wants Tony Romo back on the Cowboys. That's less great. That felt like that was the Tom Hardy. That's bait. We had Kieran, consistent friend of the show and commenter and a great member of the audience, sent in that he wants to see Michael Vick on that Atlanta Falcons team. In similar vein, Joji wanted to see Matt Ryan back on that Falcons team. A lot of Falcons quarterback replacement going on. And we also had one set in that
do we have a Matt Schaub submission?
We had Calvin Johnson back on that Lions team. I mean, you look at Calvin Johnson anytime you see him appearing in media these days, which isn't too frequently, but the man looks $1 million, $1 billion. Would be phenomenal to see Prime Megatron back out there. Okay, Phil, quickly, your Evanescence Award. Who are you donning it to? I'm
going right back to the Indianapolis Colts, Laws. Somebody who 2 years ago, his final game for them, it was a loss in the playoffs, 88.7 QBR. His final season under center for the Colts. I mean, tell me if you take this from a quarterback. 68% passing, 24 touchdowns, 11 picks, 7.7 yards per attempt. That was Phil Rivers in his age 39 season. Phils fly together. All due respect to Gardner Minshew. You get that swagger with the defense that has been abysmal, but you have him leading them. You're going to, invigorate the defense a little bit to play a little bit more clean like they did against the Panthers. Kenny Moore, 2 pick sixes. Jonathan Taylor continuing to get fit. Those young weapons around him. Phil Rivers is age 41. He's still he's coaching right now. So his mind is still sharp for football. And just quick out. Hey, you're going to hold on to the ball for 2.4 seconds, pre-snap reads. Brady in Tampa, his 2 years there. Phil Rivers, Evanescence, bringing him back to life. Final year in Indianapolis, 2-year hiatus. He's back for the stretch run.
Okay. Former AFC West star Phil Rivers with those Chargers gave your Broncos fits.
Chargers, but then he was a Colt, so I'm sending him to the Colts, not the Chargers.
I know, I'm just working on something. Another former AFC West star that would have given you fits back in the day. I didn't tell you this ahead of the time, but I'm going to hit you right where it hurts. The Kansas City Chiefs can't run the ball, and their secondary passing weapons outside of Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice looking really promising at SMU, and leave a lot to be desired. I'm going to fix both those problems, the rushing problems and the extra receiving game help in one fell swoop. Give me that jersey number 25. Let's call Jamal Charles back in Kansas City. Can you imagine the holy trinity of prime Jamal Charles with prime Mahomes and prime Kelce?
Well, you're not getting prime Jamal Charles in 2023.
No. But we're talking about bringing them back in those full full-fledged.
I was talking 41-year-old
years
Phil
of their
Rivers
career.
helping the Colts.
You can. I will give you 37-year-old Phil Rivers. That is fine. I know you Phil stick together, you fly together, but Jamal Charles, my favorite NFL player outside of the Dallas Cowboys, the most beautifully electrifying runner I've ever seen, still holds those marks of over 1,000 rushing attempts in the NFL, the highest yards per carry. I think it was 5.4 he finished on. And for much of his career, it was higher. Just an utterly explosive talent that I wish we'd got even more years out of it. But just the idea that Jamal Charles could be lining up in that backfield, 2.5 next to 1.5 with 8.7 doing the freewheeling. That is what I would love to inject into the Kansas City Chiefs. Hey, it's the bye week right now for them. We know how well the offense gets on schedule and gets things ironed out in an Andy Reid bye week. If you could only call prime Jamal Charles and get him back into the mix there in KC. And that wraps up our Evanescence Awards and our NFL Midseason Awards that only the NFL Brekkie Show is going to deliver.
I think the way the Chiefs have been moving the ball on the ground, Larry Johnson today would help what they're doing. I mean, you can go Christian Okoye. They got needs in that backfield. But Laz, that brings us to, I guess, another award. Somebody who over the first half of the season has rediscovered his form. This is our Feeling the Flow, brought to you by Pilot, where on a week-to-week basis, we will find a player across the NFL who has rediscovered his vigor. But we're looking at somebody who's done so over the first half of the season. Now, slot receivers, possession receivers, once they start to get to their mid-30s, things kind of tilt downward. Not the case with this one, who's got a young core around him, but has rediscovered his form. Adam Thielen is feeling the flow in Carolina.
Adam Thielen, at 33 years of age, after leaving the Minnesota Vikings and going to a new home there, signing with the Carolina Panthers, has been exactly what you were looking for a young quarterback in Bryce Young, the type of security blanket, the type of old veteran head that's going to show savvy and present those easy opportunities, those comfortable opportunities. But as for his own personal game, this is someone who had a slow start in week 1 and then roared onto the scene in week 2, stacking up touchdowns. He's currently has 4 receiving touchdowns on the season, but 100-yard games. He's 6th in the NFL in total receptions. Despite the fact that he's had 62 receptions on 76 targets, the rest of the guys in the NFL, far more opportunities. He's been efficient. He's risen to the occasion. He's found his younger self. He's feeling the flow. He's feeling like the best Adam Thielen, the best wide receiver that we saw operating out of that slot for a huge chunk in Minnesota. He really was an anomaly. Wasn't a high pedigree guy. He came out of nowhere, operating in that number 19, and was able to work routes to every part of the field. We're seeing that element to his game back in there in Carolina. It's been a struggle for a lot of the Carolina Panthers, but Thielen has been an absolute feel-good story. And when you look at it, to put himself in that position, to put himself in that mark with the likes of Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Puka Nacua, and Jamar Chase, 6 in those are the names above him in terms of receptions on the year. He is second in catch percentage amongst wide receivers. So given the opportunity, he's taking the opportunity. Like I said, he is rising to the moment. He is a man that, despite being written off in the offseason, has put in the work, has taken care of himself. Has always been a consummate professional, has always looked after the athlete and the route connoisseur that is Adam Thielen. And now we are seeing that in one of the feel-good stories of the 2023 season so far. Adam Thielen, very much a deserving honoree for the first half of the season for Feeling the Flow, brought to you by Pilot. I'll say, for all your men's health needs and treatment, go to pilot.com.au. Pilot, hard, made easy.
Yeah, well, it's Adam Thielen, and they're not just catches. He's 6th in catches resulting in first downs, 8 yards per attempt. Any quarterback would take that, and he accounts for 4 of the 10 receiving touchdowns thrown by Carolina, either Andy Dalton or Bryce Young this season. Well, Oz, we have one game left before we can officially get to the midway point of the NFL season. 18 regular season weeks. Week 9 ends today. Kickoff minutes after noon again. Finally have turned the clocks back here in America, which means the extra hour of time difference, which means an extra hour of sleep Monday mornings for you, 5 a.m. alarms in Sydney and Melbourne. And Monday kickoff at noon, 12:15 to be exact, on ESPN. It's time, Laws, for popular demand, brought to you by Tab, as I pull up the latest Tab markets now on my device. Today's kickoff between the Chargers and Jets from MetLife Stadium. Chargers are giving a 3.5, but there's a little juice on the Jets with the hook. This has been bouncing between 3 and 3.5 all day. Currently, the total 40.5 with juice on the over. Laz, that's surprising to me because unders on Monday Night Football this season, 9-1. Unders over the last 3 years when the home team is the underdog, which is the case today, unders are 15-3. Now, looking at the markets for the course of the season, you and I have been profitable every week as a collective since week 3. So we do say, please gamble responsibly. But if you were, I shouldn't say but, and if you were to tail Laz and I on all of our picks, you would have a profitable week 4, 5, 6, all the way through to week 8 last week. So we got a good run of form, Laz, on the season. We are collectively $8.13 or 8.13 units to the good, though my margin on you is just over $9. So
yes.
You can lead off.
All right. Thank you for the honor, given that you are holding such a commanding lead in our head-to-head contest. Look, I'm going to keep this one simple.
If this were match play, we're getting close to 9 and 8 is what we're getting toward. But
I'm turning towards Breece Hall here on the Jet side of things. I'm going over 3.5 receptions. We had success with a similar number with Jahmyr Gibbs in Monday Night Football last week, going to running back out of the backfield again. The Chargers have made productive receiving options out of multiple Chicago Bears backs last week. Certainly against the Chiefs, we saw Isaiah Pacheco have a nice game, as well as Jerick McKinnon kicking in a couple of receptions. And then Tony Pollard had 6 for 80 through the air when they played the Cowboys. That's the last 3 weeks. They're offering up receptions there against running backs. And I think Breece Hall is certainly talented enough. I looked at a bunch of markets there, but that one stood out to me. You're getting that one. I don't mind the number there, Phil. I don't mind the number there at all. Currently, you're getting Hall over 3.5 receptions, $2.35.
Wow, I'll take that. That's I understand the wager. Zach Wilson needed to be responsible with the football. The Chargers, that middle of the field being susceptible for them, and the Jets really don't have a true slot receiver. All due respect to Randall Cobb, it's kind of just 2 guys on the outside. They'll line up Allen Lazard inside. I thought to go with Allen Lazard, but I mentioned the under trend of Monday Night Football's 15-3 again over the last 3 years when the home team's the underdog. Under's 9-1 overall. So, of course, I'm going with an under prop. I am playing the under at $1.95 at 40.5. But I'm also, typically with this, I would go with the first half under. Though both of these teams skew over in the first half, whilst the Jets in the second half, unders have hit in 6 of their 7 games. So I'm going with a second half under 18.5 points combined at $1.85. A little juice on the under there, but that's because that's what the numbers support. So I think this is going to be a lower scoring game late. Very conservative game plan, I think, from the Chargers, much like they played against the Bears last week in primetime. And again, primetime games on the season, unders are 21-7 at the moment. So my first prop, second half under, 18.5 points.
I'm going to stick with an under here, and this is very much in contrast to my usual Monday Night Football picks targeting quarterbacks and perhaps some primetime interceptions. We've had some conversations around Kirk Cousins around that, Daniel Jones. I'm going the under on Zach Wilson's interception number at 0.5, so I've got him having no interceptions today. He's had 1 pick in his last 5 outings. It's only been 3 touchdowns over that stretch as well, but I don't see an overly aggressive game plan from the Jets here. And I think they want to challenge that Chargers front that is, we'll say, inconsistent at best, to slow down some of the slow down the running game, slow down some of the shorter yardage areas where I think the Jets back that they can get the ball in some hands of some talented receivers, talented receiving weapons, I should say as well. So yes, I'm going under. No interceptions from Zach Wilson today. Very much flying in the face of previous bets I've made. And that one right now, you're getting again at the plus number. You're getting that over $2. You're getting that at currently $2.15.
All right, Laz. I'm going 2 markets that are shorter than $2. Mm-hmm. My second one, I mentioned the conservative game plan with which the Chargers approached the Bears last week, an inferior opponent, a quarterback where they certainly had the better of the matchup. And they said, listen, we're not going to turn the ball over. We're going to keep it close when they're playing Tyson Bagent. And 21 of 25 was Justin Herbert passing inside of 5 yards from the line of scrimmage. He completed 40 passes over the course of the game, or he attempted 40 passes, rather. 25 of the 40 were within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. Josh Palmer's on IR. Jalen Guyton, he was questionable. He has been activated for this game, but he's not fully fit. He was only activated off the physically unable to perform list yesterday. Quentin Johnston, his longest catch all year is 20 yards. Yeah. Darius Davis, his longest catch all year is 12 yards. Keenan Allen isn't exactly a straight line burner anymore. He's more of that short to intermediate possession receiver. So Justin Herbert's long completion under 38.5 yards at $1.68. Again, it's shorter. It's a shorter market, shorter odds. You look at his longest completion, he's actually gone over this in the last 2 and 3 of the last 4. But I think with the injuries that the Chargers have, and they're going to say, hey, listen, if we play field position, we're going to win this. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be muddy. It's going to be a 20-17 type game. But we're not going to challenge Sauce Gardner and that secondary over the top. We're going to keep this manageable with, stay ahead of schedule, dump offs to Austin Eckler, operations, things we like. Catch and run is always a concern. 201 of Herbert's 298 yards last week were after the catch. But I will take my chances with somebody catching the ball and scooting 27 yards after the catch. I don't see it happening. Give me the under 38.5 yards. Longest completion for Herbert at $1.68. If you missed all those, with all the numbers are thrown out, Laz and I will post these on social media. We'll also post our season standings, just in case you're curious.
And in case Phil didn't lay it all out, the reasons why you should back him, and he is on a heater of late, just throw in this. If Gerald Everett has 1 reception today, my fantasy team is likely sunk. So you know which way that's going to go. So just more credence to Phil's fantastic argument there. Phil, get us on out of here. More the boat, land the starship.
Yeah, before we say goodbye, we have to ask yourself, what are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au. And with that now, Laws, we can bid adieu. It's a great day for a 2-screen experience, whether you are in an environment where you can have ESPN and ESPN2 up, or head over to the ESPN app for live scores, news, highlights, and streams. On ESPN1, of course, Monday Night Football, Tuesday, midday, lunchtime being prime time. Chargers at the Jets from MetLife Stadium. 2 teams that are very much in need of a win here as they try and climb that wild card ladder. And over on ESPN2, Australia's finest, Josh Giddey facing the Hawks, a porous defense. Giddey could be in line for a triple-double. So it's a great day of games on both ESPN and ESPN2. We're 2-screening it every week here on the NFL Brekkie Show. Me from New England, Laz from old Australia. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. And again, keep it on ESPN's NFL page for all the latest news from this glorious sport that we all love.